All right, today we're going to talk about an invention that completely reshaped a nation and the entire global economy. I'm talking about the cotton gin. Now, this is a story all about amazing ingenuity, but it's also a story about a really devastating, world-altering paradox. So let's just dive right in.
So here's the core of it, the central idea. The cotton gin was a machine that was supposed to save labor. It promised liberation, right? But what it actually did was create a demand for labor on a scale that nobody could have imagined. And the consequences, well, they were tragic. And they changed the world forever.
Okay, so to really get why the cotton gin was such a game changer, you have to understand the problem it was built to solve. Picture this. It's the late 1700s, and cotton has the potential to make people a ton of money. But, and this is a huge but, there was this massive bottleneck holding the whole operation back.
And that bottleneck? It was a physical one. You see, inside every single one of these cotton balls, you've got the good stuff, the valuable fibers, or lint. But it's all tangled up with dozens of these sticky, just incredibly stubborn seeds. And before you could do anything with that cotton, like spin it into thread, someone had to sit there and pick out every single seed, by hand.
So how hard was this really? Well, get this. It would take one person about 10 hours of really painstaking work just to get 1 pound of clean cotton fiber. 10 hours for a single pound? I mean, with that kind of output, trying to run a large-scale cotton business it was impossible. No way.
Now you might be thinking, weren't there already machines for this? And you'd be right. Kinda. Simple ginning machines have been around for centuries, mostly in Asia. But here's the catch. Those machines, these roller gins, they only worked on what's called long stable cotton, where the seeds are smooth and pop out pretty easily. The problem was the kind of cotton that grew all over the American South was short stable cotton, and its seeds, they were sticky, fuzzy, and an absolute nightmare for these early machines to deal with.
And this is where our main character, American inventor Eli Whitney, enters the story. It's 1793, and he comes up with this totally ingenious new machine. He called it a cotton engine, which is where we get the word gin. And this machine, it finally cracked the code. It figured out how to deal with that tricky short staple cotton. The whole point of his invention was simple, but honestly, it was profound. He wanted to make a machine that could, and I quote, quickly and easily get those fibers away from the seeds. He was trying to unleash a level of productivity that, before this moment, was completely unthinkable. And the way it worked was just brilliant in its simplicity. So you've got this cylinder with a bunch of wire hooks on it. It spins, grabs the cotton, and pulls the fibers through this narrow grid, like a comb. The seeds, though, they're too big to fit through the grid, so they just get popped off and fall away. And then, a second cylinder with brushes comes along and cleans all that pure cotton lint off the hooks so it doesn't jam. That's it. So simple, so effective, and absolutely revolutionary.
And the result? I mean, the leap in efficiency was just staggering. Remember that 1 pound for 10 hours of work we talked about? Well, now a small team of 2 or 3 people using Whitney's gin could process around 50 pounds of cotton in a single day. That bottleneck wasn't just cleared, it was completely shattered.
So suddenly, the processing problem is gone, and just like that, cotton farming becomes incredibly, unbelievably profitable. And this is where the story takes a really dark and paradoxical turn. This is where we see that devastating, unintended consequence rear its head.
Now, the logical assumption here, and it was even something Whitney himself said he hoped for, was that this amazing labor-saving device would mean the South needed less slave labor. I mean, it makes sense, right? If one machine can do the work of dozens of people, you just don't need as many people, right?
Wrong. Completely, tragically wrong. In what has to be one of history's greatest and most awful ironies, the cotton gin did the exact opposite. It didn't reduce the need for slavery, it supercharged it. It drove the demand for enslaved labor through the roof and dug the institution of slavery deeper into the American economy than ever before.
You don't have to take my word for it, just look at the numbers. With the gin in play making everything so profitable, cotton farming just exploded. You can see it on this chart right here. Just between 1830 and 1850, that's only 20 years, the amount of cotton produced in the U.S. almost quadrupled. The American South was quickly becoming the world's cotton king.
And here's where you see the absolutely horrific connection. The number of enslaved people grew right alongside that cotton boom. It's almost a perfect parallel. In 1790, There were about 700,000 enslaved people in the U.S. By 1850, that number had swelled to over 3.2 million. And the reason is terribly simple. When cotton became more profitable, plantation owners bought more land to grow it. And all that new land needed more people, more enslaved people, to plant the seeds and pick the bolls. And this is the absolute key to understanding the whole paradox. Eli Whitney automated the processing of cotton, the cleaning, but he never invented a machine to pick it. That brutal, back-breaking work, it still had to be done by hand. So by making cotton so insanely profitable, the gin created this bottomless, insatiable demand for more hands in the fields to do the one part of the job that hadn't been automated.
So what you have is this total transformation of the Southern economy. The whole thing became almost completely dependent on cotton, and because of that, it became even more dependent on slavery. This new economic reality just drove the wedge deeper between the North and the South. In fact, it's why so many historians point to the cotton gin as one of the major, though indirect, causes of the American Civil War.
But, the story doesn't just stop with Eli Whitney. His invention was the spark, but the technology itself kept evolving for more than a century after him. The machines just got faster, bigger, and way more complex.
Yeah, throughout the 1800s and into the 1900s, you had innovators like McCarthy and Robert Munger, who kept tweaking and improving the process. Munger, for example, invented something called the system gin, which used air, like giant vacuum tubes, to move the cotton between all the different machines. This created these huge, integrated, automated ginning plants, which are basically the foundation for the ones we still use today.
And just to give you an idea of the scale we're talking about now, a modern industrial cotton gin can process up to 15 tons of cotton every hour. That's over 33,000 pounds. Think about that for a second. We went from 1 pound in 10 hours, done by hand, to 33,000 pounds in 1 hour. It's just a mind-boggling leap.
And that really brings us to the big takeaway here. The story of the cotton gin is such a powerful lesson about technology. You have this engine of incredible efficiency that completely unintentionally became an engine of horrific oppression. And it really forces us to look at our own world and ask a pretty tough question. As we create all this amazing new technology today to solve our own problems, how do we get better at seeing the unintended consequences before it's too late?